Hello and welcome. My name is Amir, and in this video, which is the beginning of a series, we are going to talk about React hooks. In order to follow along, you need to have some basic knowledge about the React. Okay, so what is a React hook? At earlier versions of React, like before version 16.8, we could handle React features such as state, for example, only in class components. And in the functional components, we had no power. But to empower the functional programming, React introduced a new pattern called hooks from version 16.8. With those hooks, we can use state and other React features in a functional component. Okay, what are hooks types then? We have different types of hooks, and each of them are used for a specific reason. Here's the list, as you can see. We will take a very brief look at each of them now. State hooks. These hooks let the component remember data. We have useState and useReducer. useState declares a variable that we can update directly, like for example an input. useReducer declares a state variable with the update logic inside a reducer function, basically something like the Redux. Then we have context hooks. These hooks, well, basically there is only one. This hook let a component receive information from distant parents. For instance, suppose that our app component can pass the current color to all of the components below that need that, no matter how deep they are. For example, a button inside a component that is inside another component. By using context to read and subscribe to a context. Next, we have the ref hooks. These hooks let a component hold some data that is not used for rendering, basically. For example, like a DOM node or a ID to an timeout or an interval, so to say. And unlike the state, updating a ref will not trigger a re-render. So that is very important here. We have two hooks in this type. We have useRef. This declares a ref, and we can hold any value inside it, but it's mostly used for a DOM node and referencing to that one. And then we have useImperative that lets us customize the ref exposed by our component. This is very rarely used. Let's go to the next one. We have the FX hook here. FX lets a component connect and synchronize with external systems. This includes dealing with network, for example, sending and receiving data to and from an API, browser DOM, animations, and so forth and so on. We have three hooks here. We have useEffect that connects a component to an external system. Basically, for example, the fetching data would always go here. Then we have two other hooks that are kind of the same as this one, but with difference in timing. We have useLayoutEffect. This one fires before the browser repaints the screen. This one happens like after the component is rendered. So there is a difference here. And then we have useInsertionEffect. This one fires before React makes changes to the DOM. This is basically used by the libraries when they want to insert dynamic CSS. Okay, let's move on. The next one are the performance hooks. These hooks are a common way to optimize the app performance and to escape unnecessary render. So for example, you can tell React to reuse a cached calculation, or to skip re-rendering a component where the data has not been changed since the previous render. To skip calculations and unnecessary re-renders, we use one of these two, use memo or use callback. Use memo lets us cache the results of an expensive calculation, and use callback lets us cache a function definition before passing it down to an optimized component. Sometimes we cannot skip re-rendering because the screen actually needs to update. In such cases, we use transition and use deferred value to prioritize our rendering. Use transition lets us make a state transition as a non-blocking and allow other updates to interrupt it. And use deferred value lets us defer updating a non-critical part of the UI and let other parts update first. And then we have other hooks. We have use debug value that lets us customize the label that the React Dev tools will display for our custom hook. We have use ID that lets a component associate a unique ID with itself. It can be used with HTML elements especially. And in the end, we have use sync external store that lets a component subscribe to an external store and get the data from it. And we have finally the custom hooks. It's clear that we may need to have our own hooks. For example, we have an app that we might need to use like set interval functions in different components. So it's a good idea to define a custom hook to handle those intervals. But there are a few rules and conventions that should be considered when we are writing our custom hooks. We will talk about such kind of hooks in the end of the series. So this was the introduction to the hooks. In the next video, we will talk about the state hook. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.